They thought I'd just keep my head down and say thank you. That's what I'd always done, for years. Every birthday dinner where my name wasn't called, every Christmas where I got a gift card while my brother got an envelope with cash, every Sunday dinner where I cooked and cleaned and somehow still ended up feeling like a guest who'd overstayed their welcome. I told myself it was just how our family worked, that maybe I was too sensitive, that maybe I was reading into things. I stopped telling myself that the night my father stood up at the head of the table, tapped his wine glass, and announced that he and my mother were taking the whole family to Banff for a long weekend to celebrate their 35th anniversary, and then looked right at me and said, "You're not coming. We need someone to stay and watch the house and your sister's kids." There were 12 people at that table. Nobody said a word. My mother smiled at the centerpiece. My brother refilled his glass. I remember staring at the candle in front of me and thinking, so this is what I actually am to them, not a daughter. A convenience. My sister had 2 kids, a 5-year-old named Benny and an 8-year-old named Claire Ann, who both needed constant supervision. She also had a dog, a large anxious lab named whatever she'd named him, who apparently couldn't board because he had separation issues. The plan, which I learned not from my parents but from a laminated sheet my sister slid across the table after dinner, like she was briefing an employee, was that I would move into my parents' house for 4 days, watch both children, manage the dog, keep the house in order, and be available by phone in case anything came up. No mention of pay. No mention of thank you. The laminated sheet had drop-off and pickup times, the kids' allergy information, and a note at the bottom that said, "Please don't let them have screen time after 7. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for a long time. My hands were still on the wheel. The heat was still running. I kept thinking about the way my father had said it, not with cruelty exactly, but with the total confidence of a man who has never once considered that the answer might be no. I had a job, a real one. I worked as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Calgary, and I was good at my work. I'd been good at it since before I graduated. Numbers made sense to me in a way that people in my family never quite had. I noticed patterns. I noticed when things didn't add up. It was, as it turned out, a skill that was about to become very relevant. I need to back up. About 8 months before the anniversary dinner, I'd been helping my father with what he called a small administrative thing. He owned a residential property management company. Nothing enormous. Maybe 40 units spread across 3 buildings in the city, and his longtime bookkeeper had retired without much notice. He'd asked me to come in on weekends and help him keep the records straight while he found a replacement. I said yes because that's what I did. I said yes to things in my family. I spent 4 weekends sitting at the desk in his home office, going through his books in QuickBooks, and about 3 weekends in, I found something that made me stop. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a flashing red number or an obvious theft. It was just a small, consistent pattern. Rental income being recorded at one amount in the ledger my father showed the Property Management Association, and slightly different amounts appearing in a second set of files I found nested in a folder called Archive 2019 that hadn't been touched since his bookkeeper left. The differences weren't huge on their own, a few $100 here, 1,000 there, but they were systematic, and they went back years. I didn't say anything. I closed the folder, finished the work he'd asked me to do, drove home and sat with what I knew. I wasn't certain. I'm still not certain I understood the full picture at that point, but I was certain enough to start keeping my own notes. I made copies. I took screenshots on my phone. I kept a personal log, dates, amounts, discrepancies, in a password-protected folder on my personal laptop, not my work device. I'd been doing this quietly, on and off, for months before the anniversary dinner. Not because I had a plan. I didn't have a plan. I just knew, somewhere in the part of me that is good at not ignoring things, that this information mattered. The night after the dinner, I called my sister. I told her I would be there for the kids, but I also told her that I was going to need the Thursday off from childcare because I had a work obligation I couldn't move, which was true. There was a client deadline, and that if she wanted me to watch her children, she needed to arrange backup coverage for that day. She said that wasn't what was agreed upon. I said I wasn't aware we'd agreed on anything because no one had actually asked me. She hung up. My mother called me 20 minutes later. She didn't ask how I was or whether the arrangement worked for me. She said, "You know how important this trip is to your father. Please don't make things difficult." I said, "I'm not making things difficult. I'm asking for one accommodation." She said, "We raised you better than this. And that was the moment. That specific sentence. We raised you better than this. After 32 years of being the one who showed up, the one who helped, the one who sat at tables and smiled and cooked and never asked for anything, and the response to my single reasonable request was, "We raised you better than this," I said, "Okay, Mom, I'll figure it out." And I meant something completely different by it than she thought. I did show up. I want to be clear about that. I made sure the kids were safe. Before my parents and sister and brother left on Friday morning, I called my cousin, someone outside the immediate family drama, someone I trusted, and I asked her if she could come stay with me and help with the kids over the weekend in exchange for dinner and groceries. She said yes immediately. Benny and Claire Ann were fine. They had someone responsible looking after them. The dog got his walks. Nobody was left in a dangerous situation. I need to say that clearly because I know it's the question people would ask. The kids were okay. That was never in question for me. What I did while they were napping on Friday afternoon was open my laptop and make a phone call. I had done my research before that weekend. I'd spent evenings reading about the Canada Revenue Agency's Informant Leads program. It's not well known, but it exists, a formal channel through which individuals can report suspected tax noncompliance. I also looked into what the CRA considers indicators of unreported income in residential property management. I am, as I mentioned, an accountant. I understand what documentation matters and how to present it. I prepared a package. It wasn't done in a day. I'd been quietly assembling it for weeks by that point. Organized by year with the original figures, the alternate figures, and the specific discrepancies noted clearly. I included the screenshots I'd taken. I included dates and file names. I wrote a cover letter explaining how I had come across the information and what my professional assessment was. I submitted it electronically on Friday afternoon while Benny was asleep on the couch with the dog at his feet. Then I closed my laptop, went to the kitchen, and started making dinner. My family came back from Banff on Monday evening. My mother texted me from the road to say they were on their way, with a photo of the mountains, as if nothing had happened, as if the way they'd spoken to me over the phone the week before was already forgotten. My brother sent a separate text that said, "Hope the kids weren't too crazy, lol." I had already taken my things and left before they arrived. I left the house clean. I left a note on the counter telling my parents that their grandson had a slight cough that didn't seem serious but might be worth watching, and that the dog had eaten well and seemed calm. I left the laminated sheet my sister had given me, and I left my key on top of it. No drama, no confrontation. I drove home, changed out of my clothes, made tea, and went to sleep. What happened next didn't happen fast. I need to say that too. The CRA doesn't move quickly. They have processes, and those processes take time. I went back to my regular life. I went to work. I met friends for dinner. I ran along the river path on weekends. I did not think about my family more than I could help it. I had told the truth to the relevant authority and submitted documentation to support it. What happened from there was not in my hands. My father called me twice in the month after the trip. Both times he left voicemails asking if I was still upset and suggesting we have dinner to clear the air. I didn't call back. My mother sent me a birthday card in October with a shopper's gift card inside, the same as she'd given me every year since I was 19. My sister texted me asking if I could babysit for New Year's Eve. I said I had plans. I did not tell any of them what I had done, not because I was afraid, because there was nothing to say. I hadn't acted out of rage in a moment of weakness. I had reported something I genuinely believed to be illegal because I was a professional who understood what she'd seen and what obligations come with that understanding. The rest was up to the CRA. The audit started in the spring. I learned about it not from my father but from my cousin, who'd heard from my aunt that my father had received a formal letter and was dealing with something stressful. My father did not call me during this period. My mother called once, crying, in April, saying things were very hard, and she hoped I was praying for the family. I told her I hoped things would be okay. I meant that. I'm not a person who wanted my parents to suffer. I wanted the pattern to stop and the truth to be recorded somewhere official. What I did not anticipate, or maybe I had, somewhere underneath the part of me that didn't want to think about it, was the scale of what the audit uncovered. The CRA doesn't just look at what you show them. Once they're in, they look at everything. And apparently what they found when they looked at everything extended well beyond the discrepancies I'd flagged. There were undeclared rental income streams across multiple years. There were expense claims that didn't align with actual costs. There was, according to what eventually became a matter of public court record, a pattern of unreported income over 11 years, totaling a significant amount. I am not going to state a specific number because I wasn't privy to all of it. What I know is that the matter became serious. What I know is that my father eventually faced formal charges under the Income Tax Act, and that my brother, who I had not known was involved, turned out to have been helping manage the secondary records. They were charged together. My father's lawyer reached out to me, not to ask for my help, to imply in language careful enough to avoid anything actionable that cooperating with a family member's inquiry might have consequences for our relationship. I forwarded that email to the CRA investigator I'd been in occasional contact with. I have no legal expertise, and I am not going to pretend I knew exactly what implications that email had. But I knew it wasn't something I should ignore. The case took over a year to fully resolve, longer than I expected. There were months where I didn't hear anything and tried not to think about it, and months where something new surfaced, and I'd find out through the grapevine or through a notification from the investigator's office. My father and brother pleaded guilty to tax evasion charges. The penalties included significant fines and repayment requirements. A portion of the properties had to be sold to settle the amounts owed. My brother received a conditional sentence. My father, given the scope and the durations, received a harsher outcome. I am not going to say I felt nothing when I heard. I felt a lot of things that I don't entirely have words for yet. Grief is one of them, which probably surprises people. But you can know that something needed to happen and still grieve that it needed to happen. You can do the right thing and still feel the weight of it. What I did not feel was regret. My mother and I have not spoken in a long time. She knows or suspects what role I played. We haven't discussed it directly. I think we both understand that there is no version of that conversation that ends well. My sister sent me a long message in the fall. I read it once and didn't respond. It contained the phrase, "You destroyed this family," which I found notable, given that no one in my family seemed to consider that something was already wrong before I did anything at all. I think about that a lot, the idea that the problem was the disclosure, not the thing that was disclosed. That if I had just kept my head down and said thank you, and shown up and watched the kids and cooked the dinners and accepted the gift cards and never looked too closely at anything, everyone would have been fine. As if fine and invisible are the same thing. They're not the same thing. I live in a one-bedroom apartment near the Bow River. I have a job I'm good at and a manager who respects my work. I have friends I made on my own, separate from my family and their expectations. On weekends, I run the river path and sometimes stop for coffee at a place I like near the bridge. I am not rich. I am not living some dramatic redemption story. I'm just a 32-year-old woman who decided, one Friday afternoon while her nephew was asleep on a couch, that she was done pretending not to see what she saw. My father used to say, when I was small, that family loyalty was the most important thing there was. I believed him for a long time. I still believe in loyalty. I just know now that loyalty is not the same as silence. And silence, it turns out, was the one thing I was no longer willing to give.